Sometimes the law of God is called the first 5 books in the Old Testament. Basically, the law can be divided into 3. Number 1 is ceremonial law. 2 is the judicial law, and the third is the moral law of God. Now, when you see in the New Testament the word law, it doesn't say it is the moral law. It doesn't say it is the judicial law. It doesn't say it's the ceremonial law. And that's where it's so important, because when you see these different kinds of law or different elements of the law, the Christian must be able to discern which law is that. And first of all, I want to give a little small description of the ceremonial law. Okay, now the ceremonial law is the external part of the law. It's the external part of worship. External. Alright, that means it's the external part of worship of God, the priests, the sacrifices, the feasts, the fastings, the washings, the unclean creatures, the festivals. Those are all external. This law was a shadow of things until the perfect living tabernacle came. You understand? So these external laws were to worship. They were given for us. These are external laws in the tabernacle. But when the perfect living tabernacle came, who is that? Christ Jesus. Okay? That law is no longer continued. So this law was the schoolmaster until the faith came, that is Christ, and we are no longer under that ceremonial law because the perfect tabernacle appeared in the flesh and dwelt among us. And these were the shadows, but the substance is of Christ. The word sub means what? It's under, submarine. It's under. Okay, the underneath of the ceremonial law is Christ, pointing to Christ, to the perfect one. Understand? Alright. That's why if you write down Hebrews 9:10, let me read that for you. Hebrews 9:10 says, which stood only in meats and drinks and divers of washings, carnal ordinances, talking about the ceremonial law, imposed on them until the time of Reformation. Alright? Not talking about the 16th century Reformation here, talking about the Lord Jesus Christ. Alright.
Let's continue with the insightful discussion now.
So, okay, let's dive into that today. We're focusing on what's called ceremonial law. We've got this great audio source that breaks down biblical law, and our mission here is to really understand ceremonial law, what it was, its characteristics, and crucially, why it's seen as, well, not binding for Christians now.
Right. And it's interesting, the source points out that the New Testament often just says the law, doesn't it? It doesn't always specify which kind.
Yeah, good point.
So breaking it down helps. The usual categories are ceremonial, judicial, and moral law. That distinction is pretty useful.
Totally. And this audio we listened to really zeroes in on the ceremonial aspect. It calls it the external part of the law.
Mm-hmm. And also the external part of worship, which makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, it's the stuff you could see, the outward actions.
Think about the examples given.
Yeah.
You've got the priests, all the different kinds of sacrifices, specific feasts and fasts, various ritual washing.
Rules about unclean creatures, the vesticles.
Exactly. Very tangible, observable things. But the key takeaway from the source is that these weren't just arbitrary. They had a specific purpose.
Okay, right. And that purpose, according to the audio, was to be how did I put it? A shadow of things until the perfect living tabernacle came.
That's the crucial phrase, a shadow.
So the big question then is, what is that perfect living tabernacle?
Well, connecting the dots theologically, that's pointing directly to Christ Jesus. The idea is that the entire ceremonial system with all its intricate details was like a signpost pointing forward. It was hinting at something much greater to come.
Like a preview.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. And because of that, once Christ actually arrived, the audio explains that the ceremonial law is no longer continued.
Right. It uses that analogy of a schoolmaster, like the law guides you until you reach maturity in faith through Christ.
Mm-hmm. And once Christ or faith has come, we're no longer under that specific kind of tutelage, that schoolmaster.
That makes sense. So back to the shadow idea. The ceremonial law is the shadow.
And Christ is the substance, the underlying reality. The audio uses that word, substance, meaning the thing underneath. Like submarine is under the sea.
I like that. The shadow gives you the shape, but Christ is the actual thing casting it.
Precisely. He's the fulfillment of what the law was pointing towards.
And the audio connects this to Hebrews 9.9, which is really direct about it. It mentions these laws concerning meats and drinks and divers washings, carnal ordinances.
Carnal ordinances. That just means physical, earthly regulations, right? Things related to the body or the physical world.
Okay. And the verse says these were imposed on them until the time of Reformation. Now, that word Reformation.
Yeah, that could be confusing. It doesn't mean the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century.
No, the source clarifies that. It means the fundamental change brought about by the coming of Jesus Christ.
That was the time of Reformation in this context, the moment when the reality arrived, fulfilling the shadows.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. This deep dive really shows that ceremonial law was this whole system of external worship in the Old Testament, very specific practices.
Right. And these practices weren't ends in themselves, but acted like shadows pointing towards Jesus.
And because he fulfilled what they pointed to, Christians understand these specific ceremonial rules as no longer required. The substance has arrived, so the shadow isn't the focus anymore.
Exactly. Which, leads to a really interesting thought for you listening.
Go on.
Well, how does understanding these ancient shadows, these specific, sometimes strange-seeming practices, actually enrich your understanding of the substance? How does seeing the preview deepen your appreciation for the main event, for Christ himself and the core of faith? It tells us something about how God reveals things step by step, doesn't it?